The somatic markers hypothesis. The idea of the somatic marker hypothesis came from the realization that while the ventromedical patients were intact in neurophysiological laboratory tests, they did have a compromised ability to express emotion and to experience feeling in situations in which emotion would normally have been experienced and would presumably have been present during the premorbid period. In other words, along with the normal intellect and abnormal decision making, there were abnormalities in emotion and feeling in the absence of other cognitive impairments that may effectively account for the salient aspects of the condition. A reason that the defect in emotion and feeling, along with this neurobiological process, I then specify a number of structures and operations to be found in the normal condition. Because I see emotion acts as expressing itself, most importantly, though not solely through changes in the representation of body states. And because I believe that the results of emotional are primarily presented in the brain in the form of transition changes in the activity pattern and somatosensory structures, I designated the emotional changes under the umbrella term somatic state. Note that by somatic I refer to musculoskeletal, visceral, and internal milieu components of soma rather than just the musculoskeletal aspect. And note that also a somatic signal and process, although related to a structure which represent the body and its states, do not need to originate in the body in every instance. See Damasio 1994-1995 for details. The summary of the proposal background assumptions and specific structures and operations is presented below. A. Background assumptions. In addition to an operative self-consciousness of basics for neither of which I will discuss of the mechanisms I envision require four main assumptions. 1. The human reasoning and decision-making depend on many levels of neurobiological operation, some of which occur in mind, are conscious over cognitive, and some of which do not. Minded, conscious, over cognitive. Operations depend on sensory images, which are based on the coordinated activity of early sensory cortices. 2. All mind operations, regardless of the content of images, depend on support processes such as attention and working memory. 3. That reasoning and decision-making depend on the availability of knowledge about situation, actors, options for actions, and outcomes, such that knowledge is stored in dispositional form throughout higher-order cortices, some subcortical nuclei. By the term dispositional, I mean coded, implicit, and not topographically organized. See Damasio 1989-1994, Damasio 1994 for details on dispositional knowledge and convergence zone framework. Dispositional knowledge can be made explicit in A. Motor responses, varied types and complexity, some combination of which can constitute emotions, and in B. Images, the result of all motor responses, including those that are not generated consciously, minded, can be represented in images and become minded. 4. That knowledge can be classified as follows. A. Initiate and acquire knowledge concerning bioregulatory process and body states and actions, including those which are made explicit as emotions. B. Knowledge about entities, facts, regulation, rules, actions, and action complexes and stories which are usually made explicit as images. C. Knowledge resulting from categorization of items in A, B, and C. B. Specify structures and operations. These operations are divided into 5 steps, which will be mentioned below. It is clarified that just the first operation will be described for this reading purpose. To see the extra information, read the complete article of Damasio 1996, pages 1415, 1416. I. Ventromedial prefrontal cortex as repository of dispositionally recorded linkages between factual knowledge and regulatory states. Structures in ventromedial prefrontal cortex provided the substrates for learning the association between certain classes of complex situation, on one hand, and the type of bioregulatory states, including emotion, all state, usually associated with that class of situation in prior individual experience. The ventromedial sector will hold linkages between the facts that compose a given situation and the emotion previously paired with it in an individual contingent experience. The linkages are dispositional in the sense that they do not hold the representation of the facts or the emotional states explicited, but hold rather the potential to reactivate an emotion by acting on the appropriate cortical or subcortical structures. See Damasio 1989 and 1994. Damasio 1994 for discussion of the concept of dispositional and convergence zone framework. See also Damasio 1994. 1995 for a discussion on the neurobiology of emotion. What I envision here is that the experience we acquire regarding a complex situation and its components, a certain configuration of factors and actions requiring a response, a set of responses option, a set of immediate and long-term outcomes for each response option, is proceeded in sensory, imagetic, and motor terms, and it's then recorded in dispositional and categorized form. The records are maintained in distributed form in large-scale systems, which involve many cortices, including those in prefrontal sectors other than ventromedial, but the experience of some of those components, individually or in sets, has been associated with emotional responses which were triggered from cortical and subcortical limbic sites that were dispositionally prepared to organize such a response. I propose that ventromedial prefrontal cortex establishes a simple linkages, a memory in fact, between the disposition for certain aspect of a situation, for instance, the long-term outcome for a type of response option, and the disposition for the type of emotion that in the past has been associated with the situation. 2. The reactivation of signal related to previous individual contingencies. 3. A marker role for signal related to previous emotional state contingencies. 4. Somatic markers participate in the process as well as content. 5. Somatic markers